Centria actually sought me out. They created a position. They were doing some consulting with FTF and realized that for an organization that large, they really needed someone internal who was building the structure out and like supporting that shift internally that external employees or contractors couldn't necessarily support, because we're a matrix organization, we're humongous. And so they did some consultation in 2020 with FTF, realized they needed to kind of shift things and fix up how the structure of the company was and like who was kind of managing that project. And they kind of paused their consultation and then started looking for someone for that role. And then they found me and they hired me, which was incredible. And so since I've come in, what we've done is really looked at how do we scale this to an agency of our size? I mean, we're in 13 states. I actually think it's more than that. We have 3,000 clients, 350 BCBAs. We have 45 clinical directors. It's a huge undertaking. And the goal is that every clinician is trained in this process and that every client starts care in universal protocols. And that's how we open a case. And we get to know our clients in that way, but that's an enormous lift. And so I started in November and I've spent the last 9 months or so really just working alongside the organization from the top down and the bottom up, working on, how do we work this into clinician schedules? How do we provide them training? What does our mentorship model look like? How much consulting do we provide from FTF? How much are we working on that internally? What do all of our training structures look like? How do we train our technicians? There's a whole lot of pieces there that really do take someone who is ingrained in the system it's OBM. I mean, it really is, it's OBM, like ingrained in the system to understand all the reinforcers and how we scale and how we set up the environments and the context to ensure that we're growing and doing this in a way that's effective. And we're creating competent clinicians, not just, hey, you've done this one time, go ahead and do it, but that we're actually saying we can assure a level of quality in the support that our clinicians are providing through this process.
Are there any lessons learned so far?
So many lessons, so many lessons. I think one of the biggest lessons that we've learned, we started out first doing, bringing a clinician in and having them pick a client and then doing SBT. So we would coach them on a PFA, we would implement SBT, we do 12 weeks of training with them. What we've quickly learned is that you can't do SBT all the time. You do that in a pocket of your session, and maybe you do it for a longer period of time, but if you have a long session, there's things that happen that SBT can't manage, right? You still have to use the bathroom. If that's a triggering moment for a client, you still have to manage that. You still have EOs in the environment that maybe you can't control, like other kids in the clinic, or mom or dad leaving and coming from work, or a sibling watching a show that you don't want them to watch and the family is letting them do that, right? So what we learned very quickly is that every client we were supporting really needed a universal protocol to go along with their SBT treatment. And so what we've done is really reorganize kind of how we're building this out to ensure that clinicians are getting effective training and how to write a BIP in line with these values first, and like how to set up their sessions for success from the first moment of care, and then from there taking clients who aren't being successful and deciding which one of those clients would benefit from an SBT treatment. And so it really is giving them the fluency to put these values into action. I think that's been a really big lesson for us. For me personally, a big lesson has been, how do you align at such a scale, right? Like, so we have technicians and we have clinicians and we have RCDs, and then we have, our clinical team, and then we also have our operations team, and we have our executive leadership team, and we have all of the people managing all of the things. I mean, we have a huge organization, and alignment has to happen across all of those stakeholders in order for this to be effective, right? And so for me, the lesson really has been like, you can't over communicate. You can't talk about this enough. You can't get people into meetings with you enough and really sharing the vision with them and aligning with them with their values and ensuring that we're moving through this together. Like, we can't leave people behind as we're trying to make this gigantic shift. We have to make sure that we're doing that. I think we're doing a really good job, but with 350 employees just at the BCBA level, and then all the employees on top of that, it's a lot of people to like wrap your hands around and make sure that you're taking into account the experience of the in-home BCBA, the experience of a center BCBA, the experience of a telehealth BCBA, the experience of an RCD who lives in, Ohio but supports Texas, the experience of our CEO, the experience of the other clinical team members, right? Like, there's a lot of moving parts, and I learned some lessons. I've learned some lessons through failure and successes there for sure, how to do that effectively, and I'm still learning them.
There's research lines that are actively being worked on There's always been the research, practice research gap, all sciences in our field especially, right? Is there stuff that's coming out that you're really excited for, or that Centria is working on, or you're like, maybe even your eye in, you're like, we need to do this type of research?
Totally.
Like research thoughts broadly.
So I'm a practitioner at heart, and I want to see more practitioners get into research. I really want to see, I think that Greg Hanley is doing an amazing job, and his team is doing an amazing job really trying to close that gap, but practitioners also have to build that bridge. Like, it has to come from both sides for it to be, to meet, right? And so for me personally, I want to publish like our social validity. We're taking a lot of social validity data at Centria for our process, and so we really want to publish that. We're kind of coming up with a new consultation model that we want to publish. We have lots of publishing lines that we want to follow. Personally, I love this process. I'm super passionate about it, but I think there's pieces of it that could be explored more from like the developmental or psychology lens that would be really interesting to lean into and tie into the process a bit better. And I think that could come from a practitioner lens. I just also love the lines of research that are being followed. I really appreciate that. I was talking with Dr. Hanley about this yesterday. When he's thinking about doing research now, he said, I really only want to do research when I have a question that needs to be answered. I'm not just doing research to do research, but it really is to answer a question. So for example, we were talking about the difference between CAB 3 and CAB 4. And it's like, ultimately, shaping is shaping, and how you decide to do it is how you decide to do it. It's not something that we feel like we need to research to answer that question, because it's effective how it is. There's other questions that we need to answer. And so I'm excited about all of that. I'm excited about kind of the direction our field is taking with trauma-informed care and compassion, and like how we take these things forward. And it's bigger than Centria, it's bigger than this conference. Like, how do we shift the field in that direction as a whole?
Is that shift happening?
I think
so. Are you hopeful?
I think we won't survive if it doesn't.
Yeah.
So, I think that an organization like Centria certainly pushes it that way, because we're huge, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have a big influence on that. I'm hopeful. I'm nervous. I hope that there can be some common ground, right? I think there's a lot of it's a lot like our society in general right now. There's a lot of schism, and there's a lot of this, and there's not a lot of this. And so I think that's what makes me worried, is like, how do we get to that middle ground?
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm hopeful.
Same. I've always either said I'm hopeful or I'm woefully optimistic.
Yeah.
It's been one of those two. I'm much more hopeful on the last couple of days.
I'm more hopeful the last year,
Cool.
like things, I feel like there's definitely a shift happening.
Yeah. The question is like how fast, how
and
large.
how big. It's hard to
Yeah.
get a grasp around like how much is it changing, you know? Like, I get to work with a lot of incredible clinicians, but I get a view into, kind of what the field looks like right now. And, it's great and it's scary. I'm Hillary Laney, and I am the Vice President of Functional Assessment and Treatment at Centria Healthcare. And I also run the online Facebook community for PFA and SBT with my admins, Penny Holloway and Ed Sidley, which is what my shirt is.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.